The rain soaked through my cardigan as I stood there clutching my small suitcase, watching the door slam in my face. 63 years old, and I was being thrown out like yesterday's garbage by my own flesh and blood. Thunder cracked overhead, almost mocking my situation. I fumbled in my pocket, feeling the folded lottery check, $3 million dollars, the irony so bitter I could taste it. For 20 years, I had poured everything into raising Thalia after her father left, sacrificing my dreams, my savings, even my dignity. Now, as the rain plastered my gray hair to my forehead, I realized the true poverty in my life wasn't financial. It was being wealthy in love for someone who had none to return. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Life with Thalia and Weston had become my new normal over the past 5 years. After my retirement from teaching at Pinecrest Academy, Thalia had suggested I move into their sprawling Victorian in Lakeshore Heights to help with their twins, Orion and Lyra. "It makes perfect sense, Mom," she'd said. "You need somewhere to live and we need help with the children. It's win-win." At the time, it had seemed like a blessing. My fixed income barely covered the rising costs in Millfield, and the thought of being close to my grandchildren warmed my heart. The arrangement started smoothly. I'd wake early to prepare breakfast while Thalia readied for her executive position at Zenith Pharmaceuticals. Weston, with his perpetually furrowed brow, would barely acknowledge me as he grabbed his coffee and headed to his architectural firm. The twins became my world, their laughter filling the empty spaces of my days as I ferried them to Brook Hollow Elementary, helped with homework, and tended to scraped knees. But beneath the surface, tension simmered. Weston began making comments about his house and his rules. Small criticisms emerged, the way I folded laundry, how I prepared meals, my outdated methods of childcare. Thalia, eager to please her husband, began echoing his complaints. "Mom, Weston prefers we don't use that detergent." Or, "Mom, Weston thinks the children shouldn't watch so much television." My presence, once requested, became tolerated, then resented. My space within their home shrank gradually. First, my personal items were relegated to my bedroom. Then, Weston converted my small sitting area into his creative thinking space. My photographs disappeared from walls, replaced by Weston's stark modernist prints. My bookshelves were emptied to make room for Thalia's growing collection of self-help guides and management manuals. I became invisible, a ghost haunting the periphery of their lives, permitted to serve but never to exist independently. My opinions were dismissed with patronizing smiles or sharp glances. "That's not how we do things anymore, Mom," became Thalia's refrain, delivered with the exasperated tone one might use with a confused child. Weekly, I withdrew $40 from my modest pension and slipped away to Marigold Cafe, my one sanctuary from the suffocating atmosphere at home. There, among the mismatched furniture and scent of freshly ground coffee, I'd meet my oldest friend, Valencia. Her weathered face would crinkle with concern as I shared sanitized versions of my living situation, careful not to speak ill of my daughter. "Elawan, honey, this isn't right," Valencia would say, her hands, spotted with age but steady with conviction, covering mine. "You deserve better than to be treated like hired help." "They're busy, that's all," I'd justify. "Thalia has so much pressure at work, and the children need stability." The truth was more painful than I could admit. I feared being alone. My world had contracted to the four walls of Thalia's house, and even unhappy belonging seemed preferable to complete abandonment. So I endured Weston's cutting remarks, Thalia's growing coldness, and the slow erosion of my autonomy. Then came my 63rd birthday. No cake, no cards. Thalia had a business dinner, and Weston had taken the children to his parents' lake house for the weekend. I sat alone in my bedroom, the only space still recognizably mine, though even that felt borrowed. Valencia had called, offering to take me to dinner, but I declined, too embarrassed to admit I'd been forgotten. That night, I dug through my dresser, past carefully folded cardigans, to the small wooden box where I kept my few treasures. Inside was the gold locket my late mother had given me, containing a faded photograph of my parents. Beside it lay 5 lottery tickets, my small indulgence, purchased weekly with $1 from my cafe money. I'd been buying them for nearly 30 years, a ritual born from my late husband Matthias's habit. "One day, Ellie," he'd say with that crooked grin, "we'll hit the jackpot and build our dream cottage by Emberfall Lake." He'd died before that dream could materialize, but I'd maintained the tradition, less for hope of winning than for the connection it maintained to him. I checked the numbers almost as an afterthought, expecting nothing as usual. But that night, as thunder rumbled outside my window, I stared in disbelief at the sequence of numbers matching perfectly with my ticket. I checked 3 times, my hands trembling so badly I nearly dropped my phone. $3 million. The irony wasn't lost on me. After years of struggle, of careful budgeting and making do, wealth had found me when I needed it least. Or perhaps, when I needed it most. As the realization sank in, something else bloomed alongside it. Possibility. For the first time in years, I glimpsed a future where I wasn't dependent, wasn't tolerated, wasn't invisible. I slept little that night, my mind racing with thoughts of freedom. By morning, I'd made a decision. I would claim my winnings quietly, then find a small place of my own. Not the cottage by Emberfall Lake. That dream belonged to a different life, but somewhere peaceful where I could rediscover who Elwyn Kerrigan was beyond mother and grandmother. The next morning, when Thalia returned, bleary-eyed from her late business dinner, I approached her in the kitchen. "Thalia, I've been thinking," I began, my voice steadier than I expected. "Perhaps it's time I found my own place." She looked up from her coffee, surprise flickering across her face before settling into something harder. "What brought this on? Is it because we forgot your birthday? We've been swamped, Mom." "No, it's not that," I said, though the forgotten celebration still stung. "I just think it might be healthier for everyone. You and Weston need your space, and I—" "Need our space?" she interrupted, her tone sharp. "We've given you nothing but space, Mom. A room of your own, free meals, the privilege of being with your grandchildren. And now you want to leave? What? You found something better?" The conversation deteriorated from there. What I'd intended as a simple discussion of independence became an accusation of ingratitude. By the time Weston arrived home, Thalia had worked herself into righteous indignation. "Mom's abandoning us," she announced as he walked through the door. "Apparently, we're not good enough for her anymore." Weston's cold eyes assessed me. "Is that so, Alawan? After everything we've done for you?" I tried explaining that I wasn't abandoning anyone, that I'd still be nearby, still help with the children, but my words fell on deaf ears. The conversation spiraled, old grievances surfacing. How I'd been too protective of Thalia as a child. How I'd never approved of Weston. Untrue, though I'd had reservations about his controlling nature. How my outdated views were influencing the twins. "Perhaps," Weston said finally, his voice deceptively calm. "This is for the best. You've overstayed your welcome anyway." His words hit like a physical blow. Overstayed my welcome? In my daughter's home? I looked to Thalia, expecting, hoping for defense, but her eyes were fixed on the granite countertop. "I'll start looking for an apartment tomorrow," I said quietly. "No need to wait," Weston replied. "You can pack tonight. I have a colleague who needs your room for his visiting mother-in-law next week." So that was the real reason. I wasn't leaving. I was being replaced by someone more useful to Weston's networking. The revelation should have hurt, but instead, I felt a curious detachment, as if watching a play unfold from a distance. "Thalia?" I looked at my daughter, This stranger who wore my child's face. She sighed, not meeting my eyes. It's for the best, Mom. You said it yourself. I climbed the stairs to my room, legs heavy with disbelief. As I began methodically folding clothes into my old suitcase, I heard them below, voices rising and falling, Weston insistent, Thalia eventually acquiescing as she always did. The pattern was so familiar it had become nearly invisible, like a faded wallpaper I'd stopped seeing. But now, standing on the precipice of departure, the dynamic between them stood out in stark relief. My daughter, I realized with a chill, was trapped in her own gilded cage, one built of Weston's expectations, reinforced by her own fear of failure. She'd become complicit in her confinement, defending the very bars that restricted her. The recognition brought no satisfaction, only a profound sadness that threatened to overwhelm me. I was nearly finished packing when Orion and Lyra burst into my room, faces streaked with tears. "Grandma, you can't go!" Lyra wrapped her arms around my waist, burying her face in my cardigan. "Daddy says you don't want to live with us anymore," Orion accused, his lower lip trembling despite his attempt at anger. I sat on the edge of the bed, gathering them close. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. That's not true, my darlings. I love you both more than anything in this world. But sometimes grown-ups need to have their own spaces. But where will you go? Lyra asked. I hesitated, unwilling to admit I had nowhere. I have a secret plan, I whispered instead, tapping the side of my nose. And I promise I'll see you very soon. We'll have adventures together, just the three of us. This seemed to console them somewhat, though their eyes remained troubled. I pressed my mother's locket into Lyra's small palm. Keep this safe for me until I see you again. Thalia appeared in the doorway, her expression unreadable. Children, go downstairs. Grandma needs to finish packing. They clung tighter, but I gently disengaged, promising again that we'd see each other soon. After they reluctantly left, Thalia remained, leaning against the doorframe. You're upsetting them, she said accusingly. They're upset because I'm leaving, not because of anything I've said, I replied, folding my last sweater into the suitcase. This is exactly why Weston thinks this arrangement isn't working. You undermine us at every turn. I closed the suitcase, the click of the latches unnaturally loud in the tense room. Is that what you think too, Thalia? For a moment, something flickered in her eyes, doubt perhaps or recognition, but it vanished quickly, replaced by the defensive hardness I'd grown accustomed to. I think you've never approved of my choices. You've never thought anyone was good enough for me. That's not true, I said softly. I've only ever wanted your happiness. But happiness and comfort aren't the same thing, Thalia. Her posture stiffened. Are you implying I'm not happy? That my life, my family, my success aren't enough? I wanted to say more, to ask if she remembered the vibrant, passionate girl she'd been before Weston, if she recognized how her voice changed around him, how she deferred to his opinions even on matters of her expertise. But looking at her defensive stance, I knew my words would find no purchase. I'm saying that I need to find my own happiness now, I said instead, and I hope you'll support that, as I've always supported you. Thunder rumbled outside as the eye. First drops of rain began pattering against the window. Thalia glanced at her watch, impatience overtaking any lingering emotion. Weston's waiting. Do you need help with your bags? No, I replied, lifting my suitcase. I can manage. Downstairs, Weston stood by the front door, checking emails on his phone. He barely looked up as I approached, merely holding the door, open with exaggerated courtesy. Thalia hung back, arms crossed. I'll call you about arrangements to see the children, I said, pausing at the threshold. Weston's laugh was short and dismissive. That won't be necessary. They need stability, not confusion. You can't keep me from seeing my grandchildren, Weston, I said, surprising myself with my firmness. His eyes narrowed. Actually, Eloin, I can. My house, my rules, remember? And since you've chosen to leave, you've also chosen to abide by whatever visitation schedule we deem appropriate. I looked past him to Thalia, hoping for intervention, but she stared fixedly at the floor. In that moment, I saw with perfect clarity the dynamic I'd been enabling: Weston's dominance, Thalia's submission, and my own complicity through silence. Goodbye, then, I said, stepping out into the rain. The door closed behind me with finality, the sound echoing in the empty street. Rain immediately began soaking through my cardigan as I stood there, suitcase in hand, staring at the dark wood that separated me from everything I'd known. Thunder crashed overhead, and in that moment, standing alone in the storm, I felt the weight of my situation crash down upon me. I was 63 years old with nowhere to go, cast out by my own daughter. And in my pocket lay a check that could change everything, if only I'd known to cash it sooner. The rain fell in relentless sheets as I made my way down the pristine streets of Lakeshore Heights. Each house stood like a sentinel, windows glowing with warmth that seemed to mock my sudden homelessness. My sensible loafers, practical for chasing after grandchildren but woefully inadequate for a torrential downpour, squished with every step. The small suitcase I dragged behind me contained the distilled remnants of my life: 3 changes of clothes, a photo album, Matthias's pocket watch, and the winning lottery ticket safely tucked into an inner pocket. I had nowhere to go. Valencia. Lived in Sunhaven Retirement Community, which had strict rules against overnight guests. My other friends had drifted away over years of declining invitations while I prioritized Thalia's family. The bitter irony wasn't lost on me. I'd sacrificed my own connections to strengthen Thalia's family bonds, only to find myself utterly alone when those bonds expelled me. The Marigold Cafe was closed at this hour, its warm yellow lights extinguished. I stood beneath its striped awning, seeking momentary shelter as I tried to formulate a plan. Pride prevented me from returning to Thalia's doorstep, begging for one more night. Besides, Weston's triumphant expression would be unbearable. A hotel, then. Just for tonight. Tomorrow, I'd figure out my next steps. I pulled out my phone, an outdated model Weston had insisted I take when he upgraded, and searched for nearby accommodations. The closest affordable option was the Nightingale Inn, about 20 minutes away by foot. Lightning sliced through the sky as I resumed my journey, illuminating the empty streets in stark flashes. By the time I reached the Nightingale Inn, a modest 2-story building with peeling paint and a flickering neon sign, I was drenched to the bone, my gray hair plastered to my face, my cardigan hanging heavy with rainwater. The night clerk, a young woman with purple-streaked hair and kind eyes, looked up from her textbook as I entered. Her name tag read Zephyr. "Rough night?" she asked, taking in my bedraggled appearance. "You could say that," I replied, attempting a smile that felt more like a grimace. "Let's get you settled then. How many nights?" "Just one for now." I fished my wallet from my purse, trying to calculate how far my limited funds would stretch. The lottery check remained uncashed. It would take days to process, and I'd need to establish a bank account independent from the joint one I shared with Thalia. Zephyr quoted a price that made my heart sink. Even this modest establishment would quickly deplete my savings if I stayed more than a few nights. As I counted out damp bills, a sudden wave of absurdity washed over me. Here I was, worrying about affording a room at a budget inn while carrying a check worth millions. "Room 112, Zephyr said, sliding a key across the counter. She hesitated, then added a packet of instant hot chocolate. "On the house. You look like you could use it." The simple kindness from a stranger nearly undid me. I thanked her, my voice thick with unshed tears, and made my way to the room. a small, clean space with dated furnishings and the lingering scent of industrial cleaner. I peeled off my wet clothes, hung them over the shower rod, and stood under a hot shower until my skin turned pink and my shivering subsided. Wrapped in the thin hotel robe, I sat on the edge of the bed and finally allowed myself to feel the full weight of the evening's events. My own daughter had cast me out. The realization brought a wave of grief so profound it left me gasping. Years of memories flashed through my mind. Thalia's first steps, her graduation, the day she'd placed newborn Orion in my arms and said, "Meet your grandson, Mom." How had we traveled from those precious moments to this bitter end? The lottery. Ticket lay on the bedside table, its ordinary appearance belying its extraordinary value. I stared at it, emotions churning. This windfall should have been a blessing, but now it felt almost like a cosmic joke, financial freedom arriving precisely when I'd lost the family I'd sacrificed everything for. Sleep eluded me that night. I lay awake, listening to the rain, drumming against the window, planning my next steps with methodical precision. By morning, I had formulated a strategy. First, secure the winnings, then find temporary housing while I looked for something permanent. Finally, establish boundaries with Thalia and Weston regarding the grandchildren. The last part I dreaded. Most, the prospect of legal intervention if they followed through on their threat to restrict access to Orion and Lyra. Dawn broke with unexpected clarity, the storm having passed during the night. I dressed in my least wrinkled outfit, gathered my things, and checked out. Zephyr had been replaced by an older man who barely looked up from his crossword puzzle as I returned the key. The lottery commission office wouldn't open for hours, so I found myself back at Marigold Cafe just as they were unlocking the doors. The familiar scent of coffee and freshly baked scones welcomed me like an old friend. Nymeria, the owner, glanced up in surprise. "Elawan, you're here early. Everything okay?" Her keen eyes took in my crumpled clothes and the small suitcase at my feet. I considered lying, manufacturing some benign explanation, but found I lacked the energy for pretense. "Not really, no. I've had a bit of a situation with Thalia and Weston." Nymeria's expression darkened. She'd met Weston exactly once, when he'd come to retrieve me after deciding I'd spent too long gossiping at the cafe. Her opinion of him, formed in those brief minutes, had been unerringly accurate. "Sit," she commanded, pointing to my usual corner table. "Breakfast is on me. Today." I started to protest, but she waved away my objections. "Friends help friends, Elawan. Let me do this." Soon I was settled with a steaming mug of chai tea and a warm cranberry scone. Nymeria joined me during a lull, sliding into the chair opposite mine. "Tell me." And so I did. The years of subtle erosion, Weston's controlling behavior, Thalia's transformation from independent spirit to echoing voice. And finally, the sudden eviction. I omitted only the lottery win, not yet ready to share that particular twist. Nymeria listened without interruption, her dark eyes reflecting a mixture of sympathy and anger on my behalf. When I finished, she reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "You can stay with me," she said firmly. "I have a spare room since my daughter moved out. It's yours for as long as you need." The offer, so freely given where I'd expected only a sympathetic ear, brought fresh tears to my eyes. I couldn't impose. "It's not an imposition if it's freely offered," she countered. "Besides, I could use the company. That apartment gets too quiet sometimes." Before I could respond, the bell above the cafe door jingled, and Valencia burst in, her silver hair escaping its usual neat bun, her expression frantic. She spotted me and hurried over, ignoring the startled looks from other early patrons. "Elawan, thank goodness!" She engulfed me in a fierce hug. "I've been calling all morning. Thalia phoned me last night, said you'd left and they were worried." "They threw me out, Val," I said quietly. "In the rain." Valencia pulled back, her face transitioning from relief to outrage. They what? I gave her the abbreviated version, conscious of the growing breakfast crowd. Valencia's expression darkened with each detail. I knew that man was trouble the first time I met him, she declared, loud enough to turn heads. The way he spoke to you, like you were some kind of servant in your own home. Val, please, I murmured, embarrassed by the attention. She lowered her voice, but not her indignation. Where did you stay last night? Why didn't you call me? Nightingale Inn, I admitted, and I didn't want to worry you. Worry me? Ellie, we've been friends for 40 years. That's what I'm here for. Nymeria, who had slipped away to serve customers, returned with fresh tea. Elowyn's staying with me for now, she informed Valencia. But she'll need to get her things from Thalia's house. I hadn't thought that far ahead, but Nymeria was right. My meager suitcase contained hardly enough for a few days, let alone a new beginning. The prospect of returning to Lakeshore Heights, of facing Thalia and Weston again, sent a wave of anxiety through me. I'll go with you, Valencia declared, her tone brooking no argument. Strength in numbers. They can't intimidate both of us. Despite my protests, the plan was set. We would go after I'd taken care of an important errand, my vague reference to the lottery commission. Valencia insisted on accompanying me there as well, though I managed to convince her to wait in the car while I went inside. The lottery commission office was housed in a nondescript government building downtown. As I approached the counter, clutching my ticket, a curious calm descended over me. The clerk, a middle-aged man with kind eyes and a nameplate reading Quentin, greeted me with practiced cheer. What can I help you with today, ma'am? I placed the ticket on the counter. I believe I've won. Quentin's expression shifted from polite interest to astonishment as he verified the numbers. Mrs. Kerrigan, you've won $3 million. Though I'd known this already, hearing it confirmed in such an official setting made it suddenly, undeniably real. I nodded, trying to maintain my composure while my heart raced. What happens now? Well, first, congratulations, Quentin beamed, then lowered his voice. Between you and me, it's always nice when these big wins go to someone who isn't a teenager with a sports car addiction. His attempt at humor drew a small smile from me. He proceeded to explain the process. Forms to complete, identification to verify, options for payment. I chose the lump sum option, understanding it would be less than the full amount after taxes, but needing the security of having the funds accessible. There would be a waiting period while everything was processed, but they could issue an initial check today. As I signed the final document, Quentin hesitated. Mrs. Kerrigan, have you thought about publicity? Winners have the option to remain anonymous. I considered this. Under normal circumstances, I might have opted for privacy, but a plan was forming in my mind, one that required visibility. No anonymity, I decided. I'm fine with the standard announcement. Quentin seemed surprised but didn't question. My choice. An hour later, I walked out of the building clutching a ceremonial large check for photographs. The real funds would be transferred to my account once established, and a modest initial payment to tide me over. Valencia, waiting in her ancient Volvo, gaped as I approached. Ellie Kerrigan, what on earth? I slid into the passenger seat, unable to suppress a smile despite the tumult of the past 24 hours. It seems I've had a stroke of luck. Valencia stared at the check, then at me, then back at the check. $3 million? Her voice rose to a squeak. When? How? Last night, before everything happened, I explained. I'd bought a ticket, as I always do, for Matthias, really. I never expected to win. Valencia continued to stare, speechless, for perhaps the first time in our 4-decade friendship. Finally, she managed, Does Thalia know? No, I said, my smile fading. And I'm not sure she should, at least not yet. Valencia's eyes narrowed with sudden understanding. They threw you out the night you became a millionaire. Oh, the irony is delicious. It's not about revenge, Val, I said, though part of me acknowledged the poetic justice. It's about finally having the freedom to live on my terms, to rebuild. She nodded slowly. Well, your first act as a millionaire is going to be reclaiming your belongings from that house. And I, for one, can't wait to see their faces. As we drove toward Lakeshore Heights, I felt a curious mixture of dread and anticipation. The check in my purse represented more than money. It was possibility, autonomy, a future I could shape. For the first time in years, I wasn't dependent on anyone's charity or goodwill. The realization was both terrifying and exhilarating. Thalia's house came into view, its Victorian elegance unchanged from the previous night, though everything else had altered irrevocably. Valencia parked directly in front, positioning her Volvo behind Weston's immaculate Lexus with deliberate precision. "Ready?" she asked, her hand already on the door handle. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. As I'll ever be. Together, we approached the front door, the same door that had closed so definitively behind me just hours earlier. Valencia rang the bell with unnecessary force, her posture radiating righteous indignation on my behalf. Weston answered, his expression shifting from annoyed to coldly furious at the sight of us. "Ilawan," he said, my name sounding like an accusation on his lips. "I thought we were clear last night." "Perfectly clear," I replied, maintaining eye contact despite the urge to shrink away. "I've come for the rest of my belongings." He blocked the doorway, his tall frame effectively creating a barrier. "This isn't a good time." "Make it a good time," Valencia snapped, stepping forward. "Or shall we discuss this on the front lawn where all your neighbors can hear?" Weston's jaw tightened, but he stepped aside, allowing us entry with obvious reluctance. The foyer was exactly as I remembered, pristine, impersonal, more showroom than home. Thalia appeared from the kitchen, her expression guarded. "Mom," she acknowledged stiffly. "Valencia." "Where are the children?" I asked, noticing the unusual quiet. "At school," Thalia replied, "where they should be on a Thursday morning." Of course, in the chaos, I'd lost track of the days. I squared my shoulders. "I won't take long. I just need my remaining clothes, my books, and my keepsakes." Thalia nodded, her gaze sliding away from mine. "Your room is as you left it." Valencia and I ascended the stairs in silence, the tension following us like a physical presence. My room, no, the guest room that had temporarily housed me, was indeed untouched. The drawers I'd left partially open in my hasty packing remained so, the bedcovers still rumpled from where the twins had sat. We worked efficiently, Valencia, helping me pack my remaining clothes into 2 large suitcases we found in the closet. My books filled a small box, along with the few mementos I'd kept. Matthias's letters, Thalia's childhood drawings, the clay pot Orion had made me for Christmas. As I closed the second suitcase, a small voice came from the doorway. "Grandma?" I turned to find Lyra standing there, still in her school uniform, her eyes wide with confusion. "You came back!" "Lyra! Aren't you supposed to be in school?" I opened my arms and she rushed into them. "I forgot my science project," she explained, burying her face in my shoulder. "Daddy came to get me." Her small fingers clutched at my blouse. "Are you coming home now?" The innocent question pierced my heart. "No, sweetheart. I'm just collecting my things." "But where will you live?" Her voice trembled. Before I could formulate a response that wouldn't frighten her, heavy footsteps sounded in the hallway, and Weston appeared, his expression thunderous. "Lyra, go downstairs. Now." "But Daddy." "Now, Lyra." She flinched at his tone but obeyed, casting one last desperate look at me before disappearing down the stairs. Weston turned his cold gaze on us. "Are you finished? I have a client meeting in 30 minutes. "Almost," Valencia replied before I could speak. her tone deliberately casual. "You know, Weston, I've always wondered something about you." His eyebrow raised slightly, annoyance warring with reluctant curiosity. "Oh?" "Yes," she continued, folding a sweater with exaggerated care. "I've wondered how a man so clearly concerned with appearances could be so blind to how he appears to others." Weston's face hardened. "I don't have time for this." "That's exactly my point," Valencia pressed, ignoring my warning glance. "You never have time. Not for kindness, not for gratitude, certainly not for the woman who raised your wife and helped raise your children. What does that say about you, I wonder?" "Val," I murmured, "this isn't helpful." But Weston was already advancing into the room, his composure cracking. "You know nothing about my family or what's best for them. I know that throwing an elderly woman out in a thunderstorm isn't what's best for anyone," Valencia shot back. "I know that teaching your children it's acceptable to discard people when they're no longer useful is creating a legacy you might not want to claim." "Get out," Weston hissed, his voice dangerously low. "Both of you now before I call the police." "On what grounds?" Valencia challenged. "Elowen is collecting her possessions, which you legally cannot prevent." I placed a restraining hand on Valencia's arm. "We're leaving," I said quietly. "We have everything we need." Valencia looked like she wanted to argue further, but something in my expression stopped her. She nodded, picking up one of the suitcases while I gathered the box of books. Weston watched in cold silence as we maneuvered our burdens past him and down the stairs. Thalia waited at the bottom, her face a mask of conflicting emotions. For a moment, as our eyes met, I glimpsed something like regret, but it vanished quickly behind the wall she'd constructed between us. "Goodbye, Thalia," I said softly. She nodded stiffly. "Goodbye, Mom." As we loaded the car, I felt Weston watching from the doorway, his expression unreadable. Just as Valencia started the engine, the front door burst open, and Lyra ran out, clutching something in her small hand. "Grandma, wait!" She reached the car before Weston could intercept her, thrusting her closed fist through the open window. "I made this for you," she said breathlessly, "so you won't forget us." I opened my palm, and she dropped a small, crudely made clay heart, painted bright red with my initials pressed into its center. "I'll never forget you, sweetheart," I promised, my voice breaking. "Never." Weston reached the car, his face livid. He grabbed Lyra's shoulder, pulling her back from the window. "Inside, now." "Call me," I mouthed to Lyra as Valencia pulled away from the curb. The last thing I saw in the rearview mirror was my granddaughter standing small and defiant on the lawn, Weston's hand on her shoulder, guiding her firmly back into the house. "Are you okay?" Valencia asked, her usual bravado subdued by what we'd witnessed. I clutched the small clay heart, its rough edges pressing into my palm, a tangible connection to what I'd lost. "I will be," I promised, more to myself than to her. The first week at Nymeria's apartment passed in a blur of practical matters. She'd refused any payment for my stay, but I insisted on contributing to groceries and utilities. With Valencia's help, I opened a new bank account at Everwood Credit Union, entirely separate from the joint account I'd shared with Thalia. The lottery commission had begun processing my winnings, with the bulk to be transferred within 30 days. Nymeria's spare room became my sanctuary, a small, sun-drenched space with a twin bed and a rickety desk beneath a window overlooking Indigo Park. Each morning, I'd wake to birdsong instead of Weston's complaints or Thalia's hurried footsteps. The silence was both balm and wound, healing and reminding simultaneously. On my third day there, my phone rang with Thalia's ringtone, a special chime I'd assigned years ago to distinguish her calls from others. My hand hovered over the screen, heart racing with hope and apprehension. "Hello?" I answered, striving for neutrality despite the emotions churning within me. Mom. Thalia's voice sounded strained, formal. I've been thinking about your things. There might be more you want to collect. Not, I miss you, or I'm sorry, or even, how are you? Just practical matters, as if we were distant acquaintances negotiating a business transaction. I believe I have everything important, I replied, matching her tone despite the ache in my chest. Valencia and I were quite thorough. A pause then. The twins have been asking about you. My heart clenched. I miss them terribly. Another pause. Longer this time. Weston thinks it's better if they have some space to adjust to the new arrangement. The implication was clear. My grandchildren were being kept from me deliberately. I gripped the phone tighter, swallowing my immediate response. And what do you think, Thalia? Her breath caught audibly. I think it's complicated. Love shouldn't be complicated, I said softly. Neither should allowing children to maintain relationships with people who love them. Mom, please don't make this harder than it already is, she pleaded, a crack appearing in her controlled facade. Weston is just trying to what, Thalia? Control who your children love? Decide who is worthy of their time? The words spilled out before I could temper them. When did you start letting someone else make these decisions for you? Her voice hardened. I'm not having this conversation. You've never understood our relationship. You've never given Weston a fair chance. And you've never given yourself a fair chance, I countered. The Thalia I raised had opinions of her own, made decisions of her own. She didn't defer to anyone, especially not about her children. People change, Mom. Maybe it's time you accepted that I'm not the rebellious teenager you remember. This isn't about rebellion, I insisted. It's about autonomy, about recognizing your own worth. Thalia, do you remember what you told me when you decided to pursue pharmaceutical research instead of medical school like your father wanted? Silence greeted my question. You said, Mom, I have to live my life for me, not for Dad's ghost or anyone else. Where is that Thalia now? She grew up, Thalia replied coldly. She learned that sometimes compromise is necessary for a family to function. Compromise, yes. Erasure, no. The line went quiet, except for her breathing. Finally, she spoke, her voice smaller than before. I didn't call to argue. I called because the twins want to see you. Despite Weston's concerns, I think it's important they maintain a relationship with you. A small victory, but significant. Thank you, I said, relief washing through me. When? Saturday. There's a carnival at Brook Hollow Elementary. I can bring them to meet you there around noon. 2 hours, supervised. Supervised, as if I were some potential danger to my own grandchildren. I bit back my indignation. 2 hours was better than nothing, and a public setting would minimize potential conflict with Weston. I'll be there, I promised. And Thalia, thank you. After we disconnected, I sat on the edge of Nymeria's guest bed, emotions warring within me. Gratitude for the upcoming visit, sorrow at how formal the arrangements had become, anger at Weston's continued control, and a lingering hope that my daughter might eventually find her way back to herself. The days until Saturday crawled by. I filled them with practical tasks, researching affordable apartments in Millfield, though my impending windfall would soon make cost a non-issue. Updating my resume on Valencia's insistence. Just because you're about to be rich doesn't mean you shouldn't stay engaged. And helping Nymeria at the cafe during morning rushes. The routine provided welcome structure, anchoring me when grief threatened to pull me under. Friday evening found me at Marigold Cafe after closing, sharing a pot of chamomile tea with Nymeria and Valencia. The cafe was transformed in twilight, the bustle of the day replaced by a peaceful stillness, the small space intimate rather than cramped. What will you wear tomorrow? Valencia asked, stirring honey into her cup. First impressions matter, especially now. I gave her a puzzled look. It's not a first impression, Val. The twins have known me their entire lives. Not the twins, she clarified with exaggerated patience. Thalia and Weston. This is your debut as the new Aloan, independent, unbowed. Weston's not coming, I reminded her. Just Thalia with the children. Valencia snorted. Please, that man controls every aspect of their lives. He'll either show up unannounced or have Thalia reporting back every detail. Either way, you need to make a statement. Nymeria, who'd been quietly listening, finally spoke. What Valencia means, in her uniquely subtle way, is that this meeting is an opportunity to present your new reality, to yourself as much as to them. I stirred my tea, considering their words. I hadn't thought of it that way. I've been so focused on seeing the twins that I didn't consider the broader implications. Exactly, Valencia exclaimed. This isn't just a grandma visiting her grandkids. This is the first chapter of your new story. My new story. The phrase resonated. Unexpectedly. For so long, I'd been a supporting character in others' narratives. Matthias's wife, Thalia's mother, Orion, and Lyra's grandmother. Even my own identity had been defined primarily by my relationships to others. Perhaps it was time to author my own plot. I'll need a new outfit, I decided, surprising myself with the declaration. Nothing extravagant, but something that feels like me, the me I haven't met yet. Valencia beamed. Now you're talking. Emberfell Mall opens at 9. We'll find something perfect. The following morning dawned clear and bright, the October air crisp with the promise of autumn. Valencia arrived, promptly at 9:30, having given me exactly enough time to finish 1 cup of coffee, but not enough to overthink this. Emberfell Mall was moderately busy for a Saturday morning. We bypassed the high-end boutiques where Valencia usually shopped. Not your style, and besides, you're not a millionaire quite yet, and headed for a mid-range department store with a reputation for classic, quality pieces. Nothing too dramatic, I cautioned as Valencia pulled increasingly bold items from racks. I'm meeting my grandchildren. At a school carnival, not attending a gala. You need color, she insisted, holding up a cerulean blouse against my skin. You've been wearing beige and gray for years, Ellie. It's time to remember you look stunning in jewel tones. After an hour of gentle disagreement and compromise, we settled on an outfit, slim-fitting dark jeans that Valencia swore make your legs look a mile long, a sapphire blue cashmere sweater that felt sinfully soft against my skin, and a pair of low-heeled ankle boots in buttery tan leather. One final touch, Valencia declared, steering me toward the jewelry counter. She selected a delicate gold pendant, a small bird with outstretched wings. For freedom, she explained, fastening it around my neck. A reminder of what you're building, now. I touched the pendant, emotion welling in my throat. It's perfect, Val, thank you. Despite Valencia's protests, I insisted on changing into my new outfit at Nymeria's rather than wearing it out of the store. I don't want to risk spilling anything before I see the children, I explained, though privately I needed time to acclimate to this new image of myself. Back at the apartment, I stood before the full-length mirror in Nymeria's hallway, hardly recognizing the woman reflected there. The jeans fit perfectly, neither too tight nor too loose, the sweater's rich color bringing out the blue of my eyes and adding warmth to my fair complexion. My silver hair, which I'd always kept in a practical bob, suddenly seemed elegant rather than merely sensible. Well, Valencia prompted from behind me. What do you think? I think, I said slowly, that I've been invisible for a very long time, even to myself. She squeezed my shoulder. Not anymore, my friend. Not anymore. Brook Hollow Elementary's autumn carnival had transformed the school grounds into a riot of color and sound. Orange and yellow streamers festooned the chain link. Fences, handmade signs pointed the way to various attractions, and children's laughter mingled with carnival music piped through temporary speakers. I arrived 15 minutes early, nerves fluttering in my stomach like anxious butterflies. Finding a bench near the entrance, I sat to wait, the small gift bags I'd prepared for the twins placed carefully beside me. Nothing expensive, just books I knew they'd enjoy, and small, handcrafted wooden puzzles from a local artisan Valencia had introduced me to. At precisely noon, I spotted them, Thalia walking briskly, one twin on each side, her expression a carefully constructed mask of neutrality. Orion saw me first, his face lighting up with unrestrained joy. "Grandma!" he shouted, breaking free from Thalia's grasp and running toward me. Lyra followed immediately, her braids bouncing with each step. I stood, arms outstretched to receive their enthusiastic embraces, their small bodies colliding with mine in a tangle of limbs and breathless greetings. For a moment, the world contracted to just this: the feel of their arms around my waist, their voices overlapping as they competed to share news and ask questions. "We missed you so much. Did you know I lost another tooth? Dad said you moved far away, but Mom said you're still in the same city. Are you coming home soon?" The last question, spoken by Lyra with such innocent hope, pierced my heart. I knelt to their level, taking their hands in mine. "I have a new home now," I explained gently. "But that doesn't mean I won't see you. In fact, I'm hoping we can have special outings together often." Their faces fell slightly, processing this disappointment, then brightened again with the resilience of childhood. "Can we go on the Ferris wheel?" Orion asked, already moving, past the complicated adult situation to the immediate excitement of the carnival. "If your mother says it's okay," I replied, glancing up at Thalia, who had finally reached us. Up close, I could see the strain in her face, faint shadows beneath her eyes, a tightness around her mouth. She looked exhausted in a way that transcended physical fatigue, a bone-deep weariness that I recognized all too well from my own mirror in the days after Matthias's death. "Hello, Mom," she said formally, her gaze taking in my new appearance with poorly concealed surprise. "You look different." "Thank you," I replied, choosing to take her comment as a compliment. "You look tired. Are you sleeping enough?" The question, motivated by genuine maternal concern rather than criticism, seemed to catch her off guard. For a moment, her carefully maintained facade cracked, revealing the vulnerable daughter I remembered. "Not really," she admitted softly. "Things have been challenging." Before I could inquire further, the twins tugged at my hands, their patience for adult conversation already exhausted. "Ferris wheel, Grandma, please?" Thalia nodded her permission, adding, "I'll wait by the ticket booth. 2 hours, remember?" The reminder of our time limit stung, but I pushed the feeling aside, determined to make every minute count. "We remember. Come on, you two. Let's see how many rides we can fit in." The next hour passed in a blur of motion and laughter. We rode the Ferris wheel twice, braved the spinning teacups, which left me slightly queasy but delighted the twins, tried our luck at ring toss, unsuccessfully, and finally settled at a picnic table with cotton candy and lemonade. As they devoured the sugary treats, their initial excitement calmed enough for real conversation. "How's school going?" I asked, wiping a smudge of cotton candy from Lyra's cheek. "Good," Orion answered. "I got picked for the science team. We're building robots next month." "That's wonderful. And what about you, Lyra? How's your poetry coming along?" Her face clouded slightly. "I haven't written much lately. Dad says I should focus more on math since I'm falling behind." The information made me frown. Lyra had always been a gifted writer, crafting stories and poems well beyond her years. Her mathematical abilities were perfectly adequate, not exceptional, but certainly not concerning. Poetry and math aren't mutually exclusive, I said carefully. Many great mathematicians were also artists or musicians. She perked up at this. Really? Absolutely. In fact, I began, but was interrupted by a familiar and unwelcome voice. What exactly are you filling their heads with now, Elowen? Weston stood beside our table, his tall frame casting a shadow over the children. He wore casual clothes, designer jeans and a cashmere sweater, but his posture remained rigid, authoritative. Grandma was telling me about mathematician poets, Lyra said, either oblivious to or ignoring the tension that had descended upon our group. Weston's expression tightened. That sounds like useless trivia to me. His gaze shifted to the children's half-eaten cotton candy. And I see you're loading them up with sugar, despite knowing Thalia and I restrict their intake. Before I could respond, Thalia appeared behind him, her expression a mixture of apology and resignation. Weston, I thought you were meeting clients until 3. The meeting ended early, he replied, not taking his eyes off me. Fortunate, since it seems some boundaries needed reinforcing. I maintained eye contact, refusing to be intimidated, despite the anger simmering inside me. The only boundary being crossed is your interruption of my time with my grandchildren. Time that Thalia approved. Mom, Thalia cautioned, her voice low. Weston's smile was cold. I'd forgotten how stubborn you can be, Elowen, a trait Thalia thankfully didn't inherit. I felt, rather than saw the twins shrink beside me, their bodies tense with the discomfort of witnessing adult conflict. For their sake, I swallowed my retort. Orion, Lyra, why don't you show your father that game you were telling me about? The one with the water guns. And they hesitated, looking between us with uncertainty. Go on, Weston instructed, his tone softening slightly when addressing them. I'll join you in a minute. Once they were out of earshot, his demeanor shifted back to ice. I don't appreciate you undermining our parenting decisions. I gave them cotton candy at a carnival, I replied evenly. I'd hardly call that undermining. It's not just the sugar. It's the contradicting our educational priorities. It's the lavish gifts. He gestured to the gift bag sitting on the table. It's the implicit criticism of our choices. Weston, Thalia interjected, placing a hand on his arm. You're making a scene. He shrugged off her touch but lowered his voice. 2 books and wooden puzzles are not lavish gifts, I said. And I've never criticized your parenting to the children. Not directly, he conceded, but children are perceptive. They sense disapproval. If they sense disapproval, it isn't coming from me, I replied, managing to keep my voice steady despite my rising anger. I've supported Thalia's choices, even when I disagreed with them privately. I've respected your position in your home, despite your frequent lack of respect. For mine, what I won't do is pretend that my grandchildren's interests and talents don't matter because they don't align with your vision for them. Thalia's eyes widened at my directness, while Weston's narrowed dangerously. I think we're done here, he said coldly. Children, he called, raising his voice. Time to go. But Dad, Orion protested from the nearby game booth. Grandma still has 20 more minutes. Now, Orion. The finality in his tone left no room for argument. The Fayai twins trudged back to our table, disappointment etched on their small faces. I knelt, opening my arms for goodbye hugs. I had a wonderful time today, I told them, fighting to keep my voice steady. And I'll see you again soon. Promise? Lyra whispered against my neck. I promise, I replied, meaning it with every fiber of my being. Over her shoulder, I met Weston's gaze, letting him see my determination. Whatever game he was playing, I would not forfeit my relationship with these children. As they walked away, Weston leading, the twins in the middle, Thalia bringing up the rear, I noticed something that sent a chill through me. Thalia's posture mirrored the children's exactly. Shoulders slightly hunched, steps measured to stay precisely the acceptable distance behind Weston, face carefully blank. They looked like ducklings following their leader, each trained to maintain their assigned position. The image haunted me as I gathered the abandoned gift bags and made my way toward the exit. I'd been so focused on my own hurt, my own displacement, that I'd missed what was happening to my daughter. She wasn't just complicit. In Weston's controlling behavior, she was another of his subjects. This realization transformed my perspective entirely. What I'd interpreted as betrayal might actually be something far more troubling: the systematic erosion of Thalia's autonomy until compliance became her default state. The thought made me physically ill. Ilawan. I turned to find Thalia hurrying toward me, her cheeks flushed with exertion. She glanced over her shoulder nervously. Weston took the kids to the car, she explained breathlessly. I told him I needed to use the restroom. Thalia, what's going on? I asked, alarmed by her furtive behavior. She pressed something into my hand, a small folded piece of paper. The twins drew this for you. Weston didn't want them to give it to you, but they worked so hard on it. I unfolded the paper to find a crayon drawing of 4 figures. 2 small ones labeled Orion and Lyra, 1 taller one labeled Grandma, and a 4th separate from the others, labeled Mom. Above them, in careful childish printing, our family. Tears sprang to my eyes. Thank you for this, I whispered. Thalia nodded, already backing away. I have to go. He doesn't like to be kept waiting. Thalia, I called softly, stopping her retreat. Are you okay? Really okay? Something flickered in her eyes, recognition, fear, longing, before she shuddered it away. I'm fine, Mom. Everything's fine. But as she hurried away, her shoulders once again assuming that submissive hunch, her steps quickening to avoid testing Weston's limited patience, I knew with gut-wrenching certainty that nothing was fine at all. Back at Nymeria's apartment, I sat on the edge of the guest bed, the children's drawing spread before me, my thoughts tumultuous. Valencia and Nymeria had both offered to accompany me to the carnival, but I'd declined, wanting to keep the focus on reconnecting with the twins. Now I wished for their perspectives, their insights on what I'd witnessed. I called Valencia first, knowing she'd still be at her weekly bridge game but would answer anyway. Sure enough, she picked up on the second ring. How'd it go? She asked without preamble. Did the outfit work its magic? The outfit was perfect, I assured her, but Weston showed up halfway through and cut our time short. Valencia's indignant response contained several words I rarely heard her use. That controlling, manipulative, "It's not just that," I interrupted. Val, I'm worried about Thalia. She doesn't seem herself. There's something wrong in that house, something beyond Weston just being difficult. A pause, then Valencia's voice, serious now. What kind of something? I described what I'd observed: Thalia's demeanor, the way she deferred to Weston, her furtive delivery of the children's drawing. It reminds me of when I volunteered at the women's shelter, I said quietly. The way some of the women would behave, always looking over their shoulders, always anticipating someone else's reactions before their own. Has he hurt her? Valencia asked bluntly. I don't know, I admitted, the possibility making my stomach clench. She said everything's fine, but as evening approached, my phone chimed with a text message from an unknown number. I opened it to find a photo of Orion and Lyra in their Halloween costumes, Orion as an astronaut, Lyra as Emily Dickinson, complete with a quill pen. Beneath, the photo was a simple message. They wanted you to see. Delete after viewing. T. My heart both soared and sank. Thalia was reaching out, creating a covert channel of communication, a positive sign. but the need for secrecy confirmed my worst. Fears about the dynamics in her home? I saved the photo to my phone's hidden folder before deleting the message as instructed. I responded with a neutral, "Thanks for the grocery recommendations," in case Weston checked her phone, a precaution that felt necessary given what I now suspected. Then I sat on the guest bed, studying the photo of my grandchildren, noting the joy in their faces despite the constraints I knew were tightening around their lives. "I'm coming," I whispered to their images. "Not to rescue you. I can't promise that. But to create a safe harbor, a place where you can all breathe freely, even if only for short times." The first hint of my transformed life arrived on a crisp Wednesday morning, 3 weeks after the carnival. Pearl Harrington had found it. A Victorian cottage on Wisteria Lane in the heart of Willowbrook, set back from the street behind a wrought iron fence draped with climbing roses. The moment I walked through the blue front door, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Possibility. The cottage wasn't grand. 4 bedrooms, a sunlit kitchen with worn wooden countertops, a living room with bay windows, and a reading nook beneath the stairs. But what captured my heart was the garden. Nearly wild with neglect, it sprawled behind the house in a tangle of overgrown herbs, flowering shrubs, and ancient fruit trees. At its center stood a majestic oak, its lower branches perfect for a swing or a treehouse. The previous owner was an elderly botanist, Pearl explained as we wandered through knee-high grasses. She passed away 6 months ago, and her children have been trying to sell ever since. They're motivated sellers. The garden intimidates most buyers. I turned slowly, taking in the riot of green life surrounding us. Where others saw chaos requiring taming, I saw sanctuary. "It's perfect," I said, surprising myself with the certainty in my voice. "I'll take it." The lottery funds had cleared. The previous day, transforming my modest bank balance into a sum I still couldn't quite comprehend. Pearl had been professional enough not to react when I mentioned my budget, but I caught the momentary widening of her eyes, the quick recalibration of possibilities. "Are you sure?" she asked now, clipboard clutched to her chest. "It's only the 3rd property we've seen, and while it has tremendous potential, it needs substantial work. The kitchen is outdated. The roof will need replacing within 5 years. "I'm sure," I interrupted gently. "This place has good bones and a soul. The rest can be fixed with time and resources, both of which I now have in abundance." We returned to the kitchen to discuss logistics. Pearl spread paperwork across the worn table, her fountain pen dancing across documents as she outlined the offer process. "Given your financial situation, we can offer slightly below asking with a fast close. No contingencies. No financing needed." I nodded, signing where indicated, still slightly dazed by how smoothly this significant life change was unfolding. 2 days after being thrown out in the rain, homeless and heartsick, I was purchasing a home that spoke to parts of me I'd forgotten existed. "The sellers would like to close within 30 days, Pearl continued. "Will that timeline work for you?" "Perfectly," I replied, thinking of Nymeria's generosity in hosting me. The sooner the better. As we finished the paperwork, I allowed myself to imagine the twins in this space. Orion climbing the oak tree, Lyra writing poetry in the reading nook, both of them helping me restore the garden to its former glory. The vision felt right, as if the universe had conspired to provide exactly what I needed precisely when I needed it. That evening, I shared the news with Nymeria and Valencia over dinner at Marigold Café. Valencia had insisted on opening a bottle of champagne, dismissing my protests that we should wait until closing actually occurred. "Nonsense," she declared, pouring 3 flutes of bubbling liquid. "We're celebrating not just a house, Ellie, but a declaration of independence." Nymeria raised her glass. "To new beginnings." "And to happy endings," Valencia added with a mischievous glint. "I can't wait to see Weston's face when he realizes you're not only fine without them, but thriving." I sipped my champagne, letting The effervescence mirror, the lightness in my chest. This isn't about revenge, I reminded her gently. It's about creating something new. For me, yes, but also as a safe harbor for Thalia and the twins when they're ready. Valencia's expression softened. Of course. I just want that man to face consequences for once in his privileged life. He will, Nymeria said quietly. The universe has its own justice system, though it rarely operates on our preferred timeline. The conversation shifted to practical matters: furniture for the new house, contractors for necessary renovations, landscapers to tame the garden while preserving its wild charm. Valencia insisted on ordering another bottle of champagne as we sketched rough floor plans on cafe napkins, designating spaces for the children to claim as their own. The blue bedroom for Orion, I decided. It has that perfect alcove for his telescope. And the corner room with the window seat for Lyra. She can watch the garden while she writes. You're assuming Weston will allow them to visit, Valencia pointed out, her practical nature reasserting itself. He won't have a choice, I replied, with newfound confidence. They're my grandchildren, and I've done nothing to warrant being cut out of their lives. If necessary, I'll pursue legal options for grandparent visitation rights. The words felt strange on my tongue, assertive, unapologetic. This new Alawan, it seemed, was less inclined to bend for the comfort of others. What about Thalia? Nymeria asked. Have you heard anything more from her? I shook my head. Just those occasional texts with photos of the twins. Always from different numbers, always with instructions to delete immediately. Valencia's nephew is still working on structuring that research position at Ivorwood. He thinks it will be ready to present to her by next month. And in the meantime? Nymeria pressed gently. In the meantime, I focus on creating the foundation. A stable home, renewed connections in the community, legal groundwork for grandparent rights if needed. Valencia nodded approvingly. Strategic, not reactive. I like this new Ellie. I smiled, though my heart ached beneath the determination. I like her too. I just wish the circumstances of her emergence had been different. As we gathered our things to leave, Nymeria's phone chimed with a notification. She checked the screen, her expression shifting from curious to concerned. There's an incident at Lakeshore Heights, she said, showing us the local news alert. Police activity, road closures. My heart lurched painfully. That's Thalia's neighborhood. Without discussion, we hurried to Valencia's car, my fingers fumbling as I tried calling Thalia's number. The call went straight to voicemail, increasing my anxiety. Valencia drove with uncharacteristic speed, navigating evening traffic with focused precision. As we approached Lakeshore Heights, police barricades blocked the main entrance. Valencia pulled to the curb where a small crowd of residents had gathered, straining to see past uniformed officers. I approached the nearest officer, struggling to keep my voice steady. Excuse me, I'm trying to reach my daughter. She lives on Monarch Court. I can't provide specific information, ma'am, he replied, not unkindly. There's an ongoing domestic situation. For everyone's safety, we've established a perimeter. Domestic situation. The euphemism sent ice through my veins. Please, I pressed. Her name is Thalia Harwood. She has twin children, 10 years old. Can you at least tell me if they're safe? The officer hesitated, sympathy warring with protocol in his expression. Before he could respond, I heard a familiar voice call my name. Turning, I saw Lyra's teacher, Ms. Finch, pushing through the gathered onlookers. Mrs. Kerrigan! Oh, thank goodness, she exclaimed, reaching for my hands. The twins are with me. They're safe. Relief made my knees weak. Where? Where are they? At the community center, she explained, already guiding me away from the barricade. All the affected families are being directed there. I volunteered to help since several of my students live in the cordoned area. Valencia and Nymeria followed as Ms. Finch led us to her modest sedan parked on a side street. What happened? I asked as we settled into the vehicle. Why are the twins with you and not their parents? Ms. Finch's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. I don't have all the details. The school received a call from Thalia around 2 o'clock, asking if someone could pick up the twins. She sounded distressed. By the time I arrived at their house, there were already police, cars in the driveway. My imagination conjured terrible scenarios, each worse than the last. Did you see Thalia or Weston? Briefly, she admitted, navigating toward the community center. Thalia was sitting in an ambulance speaking with paramedics. She seemed shaken but physically intact. I didn't see Mr. Harwood. The community center parking lot was filled with emergency vehicles, their lights painting the dusk in alternating red and blue. Inside, the gymnasium had been transformed into a temporary refuge. Folding tables with refreshments, clusters of chairs where bewildered residents gathered, volunteers, circulating with clipboards and information. I scanned the room frantically until I spotted them, Orion and Lyra sitting on folding chairs in a corner, their small backpacks at their feet, expressions unnaturally solemn. Lyra saw me first, her face crumpling with relief as she launched herself across the room. "Grandma!" she cried, colliding with me with enough force to nearly knock me over. Orion followed immediately, his arms encircling my waist, his face pressed against my stomach. I knelt, gathering them close, breathing in the familiar scent of their shampoo, feeling their small bodies trembling against mine. "I'm here," I murmured, stroking Lyra's hair, squeezing Orion's shoulder. "I've got you." "Mom and Dad had a big fight," Orion whispered, his voice muffled against my sweater. "Dad was yelling so loud, he broke the mirror in the hallway." Lyra lifted tear-stained eyes to mine. "Mom told us to go to our rooms and lock the doors. She sounded scared, Grandma. Then the police came." My heart constricted painfully. I had suspected Weston's controlling nature extended beyond mere domineering behavior, but confronting the reality of what my grandchildren had witnessed, what my daughter had endured, filled me with both sorrow and rage. "You're safe now," I promised, though I wasn't certain I could keep such a vow. "I'm not going anywhere." A coordinator approached, clipboard in hand. "Are you family?" she asked, her tone professional but kind. "I'm their grandmother," I confirmed, rising to my full height while keeping the twins close against me. "What happens now?" "Child Protective Services has been notified, as is standard procedure," she explained. "They'll need to speak with the children and determine temporary placement until the situation stabilizes." Temporary placement. The word sent a surge of protectiveness through me. "They'll stay with me," I said firmly. "I'm their closest relative." The coordinator made a note on her clipboard. "That will be up to CPS and potentially the court, but having a willing family member certainly helps. Do you have a residence where they could stay?" I thought of Nymeria's small apartment, then of the Victorian cottage I would soon own. "I'm in transition at the moment, but I'm closing on a house within the month. In the meantime, we can stay at a hotel if necessary." Valencia stepped forward. "My home has 3 spare bedrooms. They're welcome to stay with me until Elowen's house is ready." The coordinator nodded, jotting down information. "That's helpful. The CPS representative should arrive within the hour. In the meantime, there's a private room where you can wait with the children." She led us to a small office converted into a makeshift family space, with comfortable chairs, bottled water, and a box of children's books and games. Once settled, the twins pressed against me on either side. I looked to Nymeria and Valencia with silent gratitude for their unwavering support. "I'll get us some food," Nymeria offered, sensing the children might be hungry. "And I'll call my housekeeper to prepare rooms," Valencia added. "The children can have the garden suite. It's the furthest from the street noise." Left alone with the twins, I gently probed for more information about what had happened. Their accounts were fractured, filtered through the limited understanding of children. But a concerning picture emerged. Weston's escalating anger over recent weeks, Thalia's increasing withdrawal, and finally, today's explosion when Thalia had suggested the twins spend the weekend with me. "Dad said you were trying to steal us," Orion explained, confusion evident in his furrowed brow. "But you can't steal someone who wants to go with you, right?" "Right," I confirmed, swallowing past the lump in my throat. "Your mom and dad are having some adult problems right now. None of this is your fault, and everyone, including your dad, wants what's best for you, even if they disagree about what that is." "Is Mom going to be okay?" Lyra asked, her voice small. I wanted to offer certainty, but the truth was, I didn't know. "Your mom is strong," I said instead, "and she has me, and you, and many people who care about her. We'll all help her through this difficult time." Before they could ask more questions, the door opened to admit a woman in her early 40s, her dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, compassion evident in her tired eyes. "Mrs. Kerrigan, I'm Zora Phillips from Child Protective Services." I stood, extending my hand while keeping the other on Orion's shoulder. "Thank you for coming so quickly. These are my grandchildren, Orion and Lyra." Miss Phillips sat in the chair opposite us, setting her briefcase on the floor. "I understand there was an incident at your home today," she said, addressing the twins directly. "That must have been scary." Lyra nodded, while Orion studied his shoes intently. "I need to ask you some questions about what happened and about your mom and dad," Ms. Phillips continued. "Would that be okay? Your grandmother can stay with you." The twins looked to me for reassurance, which I provided with a gentle nod. What followed was a careful, age-appropriate interview, Ms. Phillips skillfully drawing out details without leading questions, creating a safe space for the children to share their experiences. I learned more about the dynamics in Thalia's home than I had gleaned in 5 years of living there, and the picture it painted made my heart ache. Weston's control extended beyond mere household decisions to dictating the children's activities, friendships, even what they could discuss outside the home. Thalia's attempts to shield them from his strictest expectations had created additional tension. Today's confrontation had erupted when she'd stood firm on allowing the twins to visit me, a boundary Weston couldn't tolerate. After speaking with the children, Ms. Phillips asked to speak with me privately. Valencia and Nymeria returned to sit with the twins while we stepped into the hallway. "Based on initial reports and my conversation with Orion and Lyra, I'm recommending temporary placement with you," Ms. Phillips informed me. "There will be a court hearing within 5 days to formalize the arrangement, but given the circumstances and your relationship to the children, emergency placement is appropriate." Relief flooded through me. "Thank you. What about Thalia? Do you know her condition?" Ms. Phillips hesitated. "I can share that she's being treated at Mercy General Hospital. Her injuries are not life-threatening, but she's being kept overnight for observation. Mr. Harwood has been taken into police custody." I closed my eyes briefly, processing this information. "Will Thalia face charges as well?" "No," Ms. Phillips assured me. "She's being treated as the victim in this situation. However, there will be a mandatory investigation regarding the children's welfare, which could impact custody arrangements going forward." My mind raced, trying to anticipate next steps, to plan for contingencies I'd never imagined facing. "What do the twins need right now?" "Stability, routine, and safety," Ms. Phillips replied without hesitation. "Reassurance that they're not responsible for what happened, and that both parents still love them, despite the current circumstances. Professional counseling would also be beneficial." We discussed practical matters, necessary documentation, the upcoming court hearing, resources for families in crisis. Throughout the conversation, I felt a strange calm descend over me. This situation was terrible, heartbreaking in its implications, yet I recognized that my recent experiences had prepared me for precisely this moment. The independence I'd been Forced to reclaim the resources I'd unexpectedly acquired, even the home I was in the process of purchasing, all seemed providentially aligned to create a safe harbor when my family needed it most. When we returned to the office, I found Valencia charming the twins with outlandish stories of her travels, while Nymeria quietly organized the snacks she'd gathered. Normalcy amid chaos, a gift I hadn't known to ask for but desperately needed. "Ready to go on an adventure?" I asked the twins, keeping my tone light despite the heaviness in my heart. "You're going to stay with me and Valencia for a little while, until things settle down with your parents." Lyra's eyes widened. "At Aunt Valencia's big house? The one with the fountain in the garden?" Valencia had hosted one memorable Easter celebration before Weston had decided her influence was too progressive for the children. Clearly, the impression had lasted. "Exactly that one," Valencia confirmed with a wink. "And I believe the guest suite has a television that gets all the cartoon channels." This prospect brightened even Orion's solemn expression. "Can we visit Mom in the hospital?" he asked, his practical nature asserting itself. "Tomorrow," I promised. "Tonight, we'll get you settled and rested." As we gathered their few belongings, I felt the weight of responsibility settle on my shoulders. Not as a burden, but as a sacred trust. These children, already wounded by witnessing conflict between their parents, needed the stability of unconditional love more than ever. I silently vowed to provide it, regardless of what the future held. The drive to Valencia's sprawling colonial and Oak Ridge estates passed in relative quiet, the twins eventually succumbing to emotional exhaustion and dozing against each other in the back seat. Valencia kept glancing at them in the rearview mirror, her usual chatter subdued by the gravity of the situation. "They'll be okay, Ellie," she said softly, as we turned into her circular driveway. "Children are remarkably resilient." "I know," I replied, though doubt gnawed at the edges of my certainty. "I just wish they didn't need to be." Valencia's housekeeper, Mrs. Abernathy, had prepared the garden suite as promised, fresh linens on twin beds, soft lights illuminating the attached sitting room, even stuffed animals placed carefully on each pillow. The gesture brought unexpected tears to my eyes as we settled the drowsy children into their temporary home. "Would the young ones like hot chocolate before bed?" Mrs. Abernathy asked, her Scottish brogue more pronounced with emotion. The twins perked up at this suggestion, following her to the kitchen while Valencia showed me to my own room across the hall. "I've put out some necessities," she explained, indicating a basket of toiletries on the dresser. "And there are pajamas and a change of clothes in the drawer. We're roughly the same size, though you're a bit taller." I sat heavily on the edge of the bed, suddenly overwhelmed by the day's events. "I can't believe this is happening," I whispered. I knew things weren't right in that house, but I never imagined it would escalate to this point. Valencia settled beside me, her usually vibrant energy tempered by compassion. "None of us saw the full picture, Ellie. Abusers are skilled at presenting one face to the world while terrorizing their families behind closed doors." "I lived with them for 5 years," I reminded her, self-recrimination sharp in my voice. "How did I miss the signs?" "Because Weston was careful," she replied firmly, "and because Thalia worked hard to hide it, probably to protect both you and the children. Don't take on guilt that isn't yours to carry." I nodded, though the weight in my chest didn't ease. "I need to call the hospital, check on Thalia." "Tomorrow," Valencia counseled. "The hospital won't release information by phone at this hour, and you need to be present for the twins. We'll go first thing in the morning." She was right, of course. The children's immediate needs had to take precedence, no matter how anxious I was about Thalia's condition. I changed into the borrowed pajamas, washed my face in the elegant ensuite bathroom, and returned to the garden suite to find the twins tucked into their beds, half-empty mugs of hot chocolate on the nightstands. "Grandma?" Lyra called as I peered into the dimly lit room. "Will you stay until we fall asleep?" Of course, sweetheart. I settled into the armchair between their beds, reaching out to hold a hand of each child. I'm right here. Orion's eyes, so like Thalia's, searched my face. Is Dad going to jail? The question caught me off guard, though I should have anticipated it. I don't know all the details yet, I answered honestly. Your dad made some poor choices today, and there are consequences for those choices. But what happens next will be decided by people whose job it is to make sure everyone stays safe. Even Dad? Lyra asked, her voice small. Even Dad, I confirmed, my heart breaking for these children forced to reconcile their love for their father with the frightening behavior they'd witnessed. I'm scared, Orion admitted, the confession clearly costing him. He'd been raised with Weston's expectations of masculine stoicism, rarely allowing himself to express vulnerability. That's okay, I assured him, squeezing his hand. Being scared is a normal reaction to scary situations. But you're safe now, and your mom is safe too. That's what matters most. I continued holding their hands, humming softly, until their breathing deepened into sleep. Even then, I remained, watching their peaceful faces, memorizing the way Lyra's hair curled against her cheek, the slight furrow that remained between Orion's brows even in sleep. What would happen to them now? The question haunted me as I finally returned to my own room, exhaustion pressing like a physical weight, yet sleep remaining elusive. Would Thalia find the strength to leave Weston permanently? Would the courts recognize the danger he posed, or would they prioritize parental reunification, despite evidence of abuse? And where did I fit into this reconfigured family landscape? They always do, Valencia said grimly. Listen, Ellie, if you're right about this, confronting Weston directly could make things worse for Thalia and the kids. We need to be strategic. Strategic. The word struck a chord. For years, I'd been reactive, responding to Weston's barbs, apologizing to keep the peace, adjusting my behavior to minimize conflict. Perhaps it was time for a different approach. The lottery money will be transferred next week, I said slowly, an idea forming. What if I used it to create an opportunity for Thalia? Something professional that Weston couldn't reasonably object to, but that would get her away from him temporarily? What did you have in mind? I'm not sure yet, but Thalia's brilliant. Her research on novel delivery systems for cancer drugs was groundbreaking before she scaled back her career for Weston and the children. What if I could fund a research position specifically tailored to her expertise? Valencia was quiet for a moment. It could work, she said finally, but it would need to be legitimate, not obviously created just for her, and prestigious enough that declining would look foolish to Weston's social circle. I'll need help setting it up, I acknowledged. Contacts in the pharmaceutical industry, maybe academic partnerships. Leave that to me, Valencia said decisively. My nephew Dorian works for the Ivorwood Medical Research Foundation. They're always looking for private donors to fund specialized research. The seed of a plan began to take root. If I couldn't directly challenge Weston's hold over my daughter, perhaps I could create circumstances that would allow her to rediscover her own strength, her own voice. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was a start. There's something else, I said, remembering the other aspect of the day that had troubled me. Lyra mentioned that Weston is pushing her to focus on math instead of poetry. She seemed diminished somehow. Valencia sighed. Children shouldn't be extensions of their parents' ambitions. They need to be allowed to develop their own interests. Exactly, and I'm not sure the twins are getting that opportunity. So, what are you thinking? Grandma's poetry classes on the side? I smiled despite my concern. Something like that. Once the money comes through, I'll be looking for a permanent place of my own. Somewhere with enough space for the twins to visit, to explore their interests without judgment. Weston won't like that, Valencia cautioned. Weston doesn't have to like it, I replied with newfound determination. He just has to accept that I'm a part of these children's lives, whether he approves or not. After hanging up with Valencia, I called Nymeria to update her as well. Her response was characteristically measured. "Creating opportunities for Thalia is a good start," she agreed. "But remember, Elowen, people in controlling relationships often struggle to see a way out, even when it's presented to them. Be patient. With her, this may take time." "I have time," I said, realizing as I spoke that it was true. For the first time in years, I had the luxury of patience, of careful planning rather than desperate reaction. That evening, alone in the guest room that had become my temporary sanctuary, I spread my resources before me. The children's drawing, Valencia's bird pendant, which I now wore constantly, and a notepad where I'd begun listing potential next steps. The lottery check would fundamentally change my material circumstances, but money alone couldn't repair what was broken. My relationship with Thalia, her relationship with herself, the twins' freedom to grow into their authentic selves. I turned the page and began a new list, this one titled, "The Elowen I Want to Be." Beneath it I wrote, "Financially independent, emotionally present for Thalia and the twins, engaged with community, creative, resume painting, advocate for others." In similar situations, the last item gave me pause. I'd spent so many years focused inward on my immediate family that I'd neglected the wider community. Perhaps my experience could serve others. Women in Thalia's position, grandparents separated from beloved grandchildren, elders displaced from their homes. As I prepared for bed, a strange sense of purpose settled over me. The pain of my situation remained, but alongside it grew something new. A vision of a future not defined by what I'd lost, but by what I might build. For the first time since that rainy night when Weston had closed his door against me, I felt something like hope. Through the window, a nearly full moon illuminated Indigo Park, silver light washing over the autumn trees. I watched a lone figure, walking a small dog along the illuminated path, their unhurried pace suggesting contentment, belonging. Soon, I promised myself. Soon I would create my own belonging, not dependent on anyone's approval or acceptance. The clay heart Lyra had given me sat on the nightstand, its crude shape perfect in its imperfection. I touched it gently, a tangible reminder of why this struggle mattered. My grandchildren deserve to grow into their fullest selves, unconstrained by rigid expectations. My daughter deserved to reclaim her voice, her autonomy, her joy. And I deserved to finally step into the center of my own story. Morning brought clarity and renewed determination. Over breakfast with Nymeria, I shared my evolving plans, not just for Thalia and the twins, but for myself. "I've decided to look at properties this week," I told her, spreading jam on my toast. "Something with enough space for the twins to visit, but not so large that it feels empty when I'm alone." Nymeria nodded approvingly. "Any particular neighborhood in mind?" "Willowbrook, maybe," I replied. "It's close enough to Lakeshore Heights for easy visits with the children, but far enough that I won't be constantly crossing paths with Weston." "Willowbrook has that lovely community center too," Nymeria noted. "They offer art classes, book clubs. Might be a good way to rebuild your social connections." The suggestion resonated. During my years living with Thalia, I'd allowed my own friendships and interests to wither, focusing entirely on being available for the family. The few connections I'd maintained, Valencia, Nymeria, had proven invaluable during my crisis. Perhaps it was time to expand that circle, to create a community of my own. After breakfast, I called Pearl Harrington, a realtor Valencia had recommended. "I'm looking for something specific," I explained after introducing myself. "A house with character, room for grandchildren to visit, preferably in Willowbrook. My budget is flexible." Pearl sounded delighted by the prospect. "I actually have several properties that might suit you." Are you available to view them this week? We arranged to meet the following day, giving me time to research the area more thoroughly. As I hung up, a surge of excitement mixed with trepidation washed over me. This wasn't just about finding shelter, it was about creating a new home, a new center for my life. The remainder of the day passed in research and planning. Valencia called mid-afternoon with news from her nephew at the Ivorwood Medical Research Foundation. Dorian says they've been trying to secure funding for a specialized study on targeted drug delivery systems for pediatric patients, she reported. It's exactly in Thalia's wheelhouse, and Dorian thinks they could structure a position that would be perfect for her, part-time initially, with the potential to grow. That sounds ideal, I agreed. What would it take to make this happen? Valencia hesitated briefly. A substantial donation. They're looking for at least $500,000 to get the program off the ground. The sum would have been unimaginable mere weeks ago. Now it represented only a fraction of my unexpected wealth. Done, I said without hesitation. What's the next step? We spent an hour discussing logistics, how to structure the donation, to ensure the position's creation, while maintaining enough distance that Thalia wouldn't immediately connect it to me. Valencia's nephew would handle the internal details, presenting the opportunity to Thalia directly through professional channels. It will take a few weeks to set everything up, Valencia cautioned. These things can't be rushed if we want them to appear legitimate. That's fine, I assured her. In the meantime, I'll focus on establishing my new home and finding a way to maintain contact with the twins despite Weston's resistance. The answers wouldn't come tonight, I realized, staring at the ornate ceiling of Valencia's guest room. All I could do was face each moment as it arrived, offering what stability and love I could in the midst of turmoil. Dawn found me already, awake, checking my phone for messages from the hospital, from Ms. Phillips, from anyone who might provide updates on Thalia's condition. Nothing. I dressed quickly in clothes Valencia had laid out, designer jeans that fit surprisingly well and a cashmere sweater in deep burgundy, and made my way to the kitchen, where Mrs. Abernathy was already preparing breakfast. The wee ones still sleep, she informed me, sliding a cup of coffee across the counter. Poor lambs were exhausted, no doubt. Thank you for looking after them, I said, warming my hands around the mug. This whole situation is so… it's a right mess, Mrs. Abernathy agreed, her blunt assessment somehow comforting in its honesty. But they've got you, haven't they? That's no small blessing. Valencia appeared, already dressed for the day in a tailored pantsuit, her silver hair swept into an elegant chignon. I've called Nymeria, she announced. She's going to meet us at the hospital. And I've spoken with my attorney. He'll represent you at the custody hearing if needed. I started to protest this generosity, then stopped myself. My newfound financial independence meant I could reimburse Valencia for legal fees, but more importantly, I recognized that accepting help wasn't weakness. It was wisdom. Thank you, I said simply, for everything. The twins woke an hour later, momentarily disoriented by the unfamiliar surroundings before remembering the previous day's events. Breakfast was a quiet affair, the children picking at Mrs. Abernathy's. Pancakes despite her encouragement. We'll see your mom this morning, I reminded them, hoping to lift their spirits. And we can bring her something special. What do you think she'd like? This prompted thoughtful consideration, then a flurry of activity as Lyra decided to draw a card while Orion carefully selected books from Valencia's library that he thought might entertain his mother during her hospital stay. Their resilience both impressed and saddened me. Children shouldn't need to develop coping mechanisms for parental trauma, yet here they were, finding ways to navigate a situation no child should face. Miss Phillips called as we were preparing to leave for the hospital. Mrs. Kerrigan, I wanted to update you before your hospital visit. The court has issued a temporary restraining order against Mr. Harwood. He's prohibited from contacting Ms. Harwood or the children pending the hearing. Relief washed through me. Has he been released from custody? Not yet, she replied. He's being arraigned this morning on domestic violence charges. I'll attend the hearing and let you know the outcome. I thanked her, ending the call with mixed emotions. The restraining order provided immediate protection, but the legal process ahead promised to be lengthy and painful for everyone involved, especially the twins. Mercy General Hospital was bustling with morning activity when we arrived, Valencia, leading the way with her characteristic confidence. At the information desk, I provided Thalia's information, bracing myself for potential resistance to our visit. She's in room 317, the clerk informed us after checking her computer. Family visits are permitted, 2 at a time. I knelt to the twins' level. How about if Orion goes up first with me, then Lyra? Each of you can have special time with your mom. They agreed to this arrangement, though Lyra looked disappointed at having to wait. Valencia offered to take her to the gift shop to select a small present, which brightened her mood considerably. Orion clutched his carefully chosen books as we rode the elevator to the 3rd floor, his small face solemn with purpose. Mom likes mystery novels best, he informed me, as if I might not recall my own daughter's preferences. But I brought her favorite poetry book too, in case she's too tired to focus on a story. My heart swelled with love for this thoughtful boy, so attuned to others' needs despite his own distress. That's very considerate, Orion. I'm sure she'll appreciate your choices. Room 317 had its door partially closed. I knocked gently, then pushed it open to find Thalia sitting up in bed, a nurse adjusting her IV line. My breath caught at the sight of her, pale, with a butterfly bandage across her left eyebrow and bruising visible along her jawline. "Mom?" she said, surprise evident in her voice. Then her gaze shifted to Orion and her expression transformed into a mixture of joy and sorrow. "Orion, my brave boy!" Orion rushed forward, careful not to disturb the medical equipment as he embraced his mother. Thalia winced slightly but held him close, pressing kisses to the top of his head. "I brought books," he announced, pulling back to show her his selections. "For when you have to stay here and get bored." "That's so thoughtful," Thalia replied, her voice catching. "Thank you, sweetheart." The nurse finished her tasks and slipped out, leaving us in momentary privacy. I approached the bed slowly, uncertain of my welcome despite our shared crisis. "How are you feeling?" I asked, the inadequacy of the question burning in my throat. How could any words encompass the complexity of this moment? Thalia met my gaze, something vulnerable and raw in her expression. "I've been better," she admitted with a weak attempt at humor. Then more seriously, "Thank you for taking the twins. I couldn't bear the thought of them going to strangers." "They'll always have a home with me," I assured her, perching carefully on the edge of the bed. "For as long as needed." Orion had settled in a chair by the window, already absorbed in one of the books he'd brought, giving us a semblance of privacy. I lowered my voice. "Thalia, why didn't you tell me how bad things had gotten?" She looked away, fingers picking at the thin hospital blanket. I didn't want to admit it, even to myself, and after how things ended between us, with you leaving. "I didn't leave," I corrected gently. "I was thrown out. By Weston." Her eyes widened slightly. "He told me you'd decided to move out, that you were tired of helping with the twins." The deliberate manipulation didn't surprise me, yet hearing it confirmed still stung. "That's not what happened, but that's a conversation for another day. Right now, we need to focus on your recovery and the children's stability." Thalia nodded, then winced at the movement. "The doctors say I can go home tomorrow, but—" Her voice trailed off, the unspoken question hanging between us. "Home to where?" "Valencia has plenty of room for all of us," I assured her. "And I'm closing on a house in Willowbrook within the month. 4 bedrooms, A lovely garden, plenty of space for everyone to heal. You bought a house? Thalia asked, confusion evident in her bruised face. But how? Your savings. I hesitated, unsure whether this was the right moment to reveal my changed circumstances. Before I could decide, the door opened to admit Lyra, clutching a small potted orchid with Valencia close behind. 10 minutes is long enough, Lyra announced, fixing her brother with a pointed look. It's my turn with Mom. The moment for financial revelations passed as we orchestrated the exchange, Orion reluctantly relinquishing his position while Lyra presented her gifts, the orchid, and a handmade card covered in glitter that immediately shed onto the hospital blanket. Valencia drew me into the hallway, her expression grave. My attorney called. Weston's been released on bail, despite the prosecution's objections. The restraining order is in place, but restraining orders were just papers, easily violated by someone determined enough. The knowledge settled like lead in my stomach. Thalia and the children weren't safe yet. Not truly, not completely. We need to move up the closing on the house, I decided, thinking of its wrought iron fence, its secluded garden, its distance from Lakeshore Heights. And we need better security than I'd initially planned. Valencia nodded, already typing in her phone. I'll have Pearl call the sellers today, and I know an excellent security firm, discreet but thorough. As we strategized in hushed tones, I glanced through the doorway at my daughter and granddaughter, their heads bent together over Lyra's card. Despite the bruises marring Thalia's face, despite the sterile hospital setting, there was something beautiful in their connection, something Weston had tried to control but never managed to extinguish. That was the foundation we would build upon, I realized. Not the broken pieces of what had been, but the enduring bonds that remained despite everything. It wouldn't be easy or straightforward. Healing rarely follows a linear path. But for the first time since this crisis began, I glimpsed a way forward illuminated by something that felt remarkably like hope. Spring arrived with gentle insistence, coaxing reluctant buds from winter bare branches and painting the Victorian cottage's garden with splashes of color. Crocuses pushing through damp soil, daffodils nodding in the breeze, the ancient magnolia by the gate unfurling delicate pink blossoms. 6 months had passed since that rainy night when Weston closed his door against me. 6 months of profound transformation that no lottery winnings could have purchased. I stood at the kitchen window, morning coffee warming my hands, watching Orion direct the treehouse construction with earnest authority. The contractor, a gentle giant named Huxley with infinite patience for curious children, nodded seriously as my grandson explained his latest design modification. He's going to be an architect, Thalia observed, joining me at the window. Or possibly a benevolent dictator. I smiled, noting the easy humor that had gradually returned to my daughter's voice over recent months. He certainly has opinions. Lyra's the same way about her garden beds. The vegetable and flower beds had been Lyra's winter project, carefully researched, meticulously planned on graph paper, eagerly anticipated as the ground thawed. Now, seedlings grew under grow lights in the converted sunroom, labeled with her precise handwriting, monitored daily in the journal that had expanded from emotional processing to scientific observation. Dr. Brightman says their passion projects are healing, Thalia noted, sipping her tea. Creating something beautiful where they have control, where they can see direct results from their efforts. Makes sense for adults, too, I replied, thinking of my own therapeutic outlets. The renovations I'd overseen, the community garden plot I'd claimed at Willowbrook Commons, the watercolor classes I'd begun attending at the senior center. Thalia nodded thoughtfully. Speaking of which, I've made a decision about Ivorwood. My heart quickened at the reference to the research position Valencia's nephew had finally structured, presenting it to Thalia the previous month as an opportunity specifically aligned with her expertise. She had been considering it carefully, weighing professional aspirations against family needs, independence against security. "I'm going to accept," she said, her voice gaining confidence with each word. "Part-time initially, 3 days a week, with the option to expand as the project develops. The timing feels right." Pride swelled within me. Not because she'd chosen the path I'd secretly hoped for, but because she'd made the decision through careful consideration rather than external pressure or fear. "That's wonderful news," I said simply. "The research sounds fascinating." "It is," she agreed, enthusiasm animating her features. "Targeted delivery systems for pediatric cancer treatments, minimizing side effects, potentially transforming outcomes for the most vulnerable patients. It's meaningful work, the kind I've missed." The position would take her back into a professional community where her brilliance had once been recognized, provide intellectual stimulation beyond domestic concerns, and create financial independence that would further cement her autonomy. Though I'd never mentioned my role in establishing the opportunity, I felt quiet satisfaction in having created conditions that supported her growth rather than constrained it. "There's something else," Thalia continued, a slight hesitation entering her tone. "Weston called yesterday." I maintained a neutral expression despite the immediate tension that shot through me at his name. Over the past 6 months, Weston had moved through the prescribed stages of his court-mandated program with apparent diligence: anger management, individual therapy, parenting classes focused on emotional intelligence and appropriate boundaries. His supervised visitation with the twins had progressed to day-long unsupervised visits, though they still took place at his parents' home rather than his Lakeshore Heights residence. "What did he want?" I asked carefully. Thalia set her mug on the counter, organizing her thoughts before responding. "He's completed all requirements of his plea agreement. The final assessment reports are positive across the board. His therapist has recommended termination of the restraining order, with court approval." I absorbed this information, studying my daughter's expression for clues to her feelings about this development. Her face revealed little, a composure. She'd developed not as mask or defense, but as genuine emotional regulation, hard-won through months of intensive therapy. "How do you feel about that possibility?" I asked finally. She considered the question with characteristic thoughtfulness. 2 months ago, I would have said absolutely not. The mere thought of being in the same room with him triggered panic attacks. She glanced toward the garden, where Orion was now measuring boards with exaggerated care. "But the children need a relationship with their father if it can be healthy. Complete separation isn't sustainable or desirable long-term." "And for you?" I pressed gently. "Beyond the children's needs?" Thalia met my gaze directly. "I'm not afraid of him anymore, Mom. I'm not saying I trust him. Trust requires consistent behavior over extended time. But I'm not afraid. That's significant progress." It was indeed significant. A transformation I'd watched unfold gradually, as she reclaimed her power, reconnected with her own strength, developed boundaries both physical and emotional. The woman standing before me bore little resemblance to the shadow who had stood silently while Weston ordered me from their home, or the bruised figure I'd found in the hospital bed. "The court hearing is next Tuesday," she continued. "If they approve termination of the restraining order, Weston wants to meet, neutral location, public setting with the family mediator present, to discuss co-parenting arrangements moving forward. Do you want me to accompany you?" I offered, careful not to overstep. She shook her head, a small smile acknowledging my intention. "I need to do this myself, but thank you for offering." She hesitated, then added, "There's something else I want to discuss with him, beyond the children's schedules." "Oh?" "Divorce papers," she said quietly but firmly. "It's time to formalize our separation." The declaration wasn't surprising. Thalia had been working with her attorney for months, preparing necessary documentation, evaluating financial entanglements. but the calm certainty in her voice represented the culmination of a difficult journey from emotional dependence to clear-eyed decision-making. "You're sure?" I asked, not questioning her choice but confirming her readiness. "Completely," she affirmed. Dr. Newell says certainty often emerges gradually, like tide going out. Each wave retreats a little further until suddenly you realize you're standing on dry sand. That's where I am now. Complete clarity. I reached for her hand, squeezing gently. "I'm proud of you, Thalia. Not because you're divorcing Weston. That's your decision alone. But because you found your voice. Again, the one that always knew what was right for you, before outside influences drowned it out." "I had good teachers," she replied, returning the squeeze. "You modeled independence even when life tried to take away your choices. I watched you rebuild from nothing these past months. If you could do it at 63, I could certainly do it at 42. The comparison startled me. I hadn't considered that my own journey might provide inspiration for Thalia's. I'd been so focused on creating stability for her and the I. Twins that I'd overlooked how my choices might function as template for possibilities. Our conversation paused as the back door burst open, admitting Lyra in mud-spattered overalls, brandishing a trowel like a scepter. "Grandma! Mom! The tulip bulbs are sprouting. Come see!" We followed her into the awakening garden, where tender green shoots had indeed pushed through the soil in neat rows along the stone pathway. Lyra knelt beside them, gently brushing away debris from their emerging forms. "They'll be yellow and pink striped when they bloom," she informed us with authority. "The catalog said they're called Rembrandt tulips." "They're going to be beautiful," I assured her, appreciating both the growing plants and the nurturing care my granddaughter provided. Her relationship with the garden had evolved from scientific experiment to genuine stewardship, a healing progression Dr. Brightman had noted with approval during our last family session. The day unfolded in gentle rhythm, garden work while morning light remained soft, lunch on the newly constructed patio, afternoon quiet time where each family member retreated to individual pursuits. I settled in the reading nook with account ledgers for the small foundation I'd established with a portion of my lottery winnings. The Emberfall Foundation, named for the lake where Matthias and I had dreamed of building our cottage, focused on supporting women and children transitioning from domestic violence situations. The work had evolved organically from our family's experience, connecting me with a community of survivors and advocates whose wisdom continually expanded my understanding of both trauma and recovery. My phone chimed with a message from Valencia. "Committee approved the shelter expansion. Your grant proposal pushed us over the funding threshold. Celebratory dinner at Marigold's tonight?" I smiled, typing a quick acceptance. The expansion would double capacity at Willowbrook's only domestic violence shelter, addressing a critical need in our community. The grant represented my foundation's largest commitment to date, but the investment felt right, creating tangible support for families undertaking journeys similar to ours. A soft knock at the doorframe interrupted my calculations. Orion stood there, uncharacteristically hesitant, clutching a folder to his chest. "Grandma? Are you busy?" "Never too busy." "For you," I assured him, setting aside my work. "What's up?" He settled beside me on the window seat, carefully opening the folder to reveal architectural drawings, surprisingly sophisticated sketches of what appeared to be a small cottage. "I've been working on this design," he explained. "For the back corner of the property, where the old tool shed is falling apart." I examined the drawings with genuine admiration. Though clearly the work of a child, they showed remarkable spatial understanding and attention to detail. "These are impressive, Orion. What would the building be for?" He hesitated, fingers smoothing an imaginary wrinkle from the paper. "It's for Mom. For when she's ready to have her own space again." The explanation caught me off guard. Though we'd never explicitly discussed long-term living arrangements, I'd assumed our current situation, sharing the Victorian cottage as extended family, might continue indefinitely. The realization that Orion had been contemplating his mother's eventual independence revealed both his emotional intelligence and his ongoing processing of family dynamics. "Your mom is welcome to stay with us as long as she wants," I said carefully. "There's no rush for her to move out." "I know," he replied, wisdom beyond his years evident in his earnest expression. "But Dr. Brightman says healing means growing stronger until you're ready for your next chapter. Mom's getting stronger every day. I want her to have somewhere perfect when she's ready for her next chapter." Tears pricked behind my eyes at his insight. "That's incredibly thoughtful, Orion. Have you shown these plans to your mom?" He shook his head. "Not yet. I wanted your opinion first, and—" He hesitated, suddenly appearing very young despite his mature reasoning. "I wondered if you'd help me build it, when it's time." "It would be my honor," I assured him, wrapping an arm around his narrow shoulders. "We can start planning materials and timelines whenever you're ready." He leaned briefly against me, these moments of physical affection becoming increasingly rare as he approached adolescence, before carefully returning the drawings to their folder. "Thanks, Grandma. I'm going to refine the bathroom layout. The current shower configuration is inefficient." I watched him depart, marveling at how children absorb and process the world around them, finding meaning, creating purpose, building frameworks for understanding even the most complex circumstances. Orion's project represented not anxiety about change but acceptance of growth, a healthier perspective than many adults manage to achieve. The evening brought Valencia's promised celebration at Marigold Café, now expanded into adjacent retail space to accommodate growing popularity. Nymeria greeted us with warm embraces, ushering our party to the private back room she'd decorated with fresh flowers and twinkling lights. "The grande dame of philanthropy arrives," Valencia announced as I entered, raising her glass in theatrical toast, "without whom dozens of women and children would remain without safe harbor." I waved away her extravagant praise, though pleasure warmed my cheeks. The foundation merely connected existing resources with urgent needs. The real work happens through providers like Willowbrook Shelter. "False modesty doesn't suit you, Ellie," Valencia chided good-naturedly. "Embrace your impact. $3 million won by chance, deployed with intentional purpose. That's worth celebrating." The group assembled represented the unexpected community that had formed around our family's transformation. Valencia and Nymeria, of course, but also Ms. Phillips from Child Protective Services, now a valuable advisor to the foundation. Dr. Brightman, whose professional boundaries had gradually expanded to include genuine friendship. Pearl Harrington, whose real estate expertise had proven invaluable in identifying properties suitable for transitional housing programs. Conspicuously absent was Pauline Harwood, who had maintained her relationship with the twins through regular visits but declined tonight's invitation with characteristic reserve. Her position remained delicate, supporting her grandchildren and daughter-in-law while maintaining loyalty to her son, navigating complex family dynamics with dignity, if not perfect grace. Champagne flowed as Valencia recounted the shelter expansion, plans with characteristic flair, emphasizing architectural details and design elements that would create both security and beauty for residents. Thalia listened attentively, occasionally asking insightful questions about trauma-informed design principles that drew appreciative nods from Ms. Phillips. "We're incorporating a research component as well," Valencia explained, gesturing expansively. "Longitudinal studies of recovery outcomes based on different support models." "Fascinating," Thalia commented. "Have you considered collecting biomarker data? Stress hormone levels could provide objective measures to complement subjective reporting." The conversation flowed into technical territory, Thalia's scientific expertise evident as she elaborated on potential research methodologies. I watched her with quiet pride, noting how her professional confidence had returned alongside her personal strength, each aspect of her identity supporting and enhancing the others. The twins, initially reluctant to attend an adult dinner, had been persuaded by Nymeria's promise of exclusive access to the cafe's dessert kitchen. They now appeared periodically, dusted with flour and vibrating with sugar-fueled enthusiasm, to report on their culinary experiments. "We're making celebration cupcakes," Lyra announced during one such appearance. "With edible gold dust on top, because Grandma deserves actual gold for helping people." The simple declaration, delivered with absolute conviction, touched me deeply. Beyond the financial impact of my lottery winnings, beyond the practical support I'd provided during crisis, my grandchildren had absorbed the most important lesson I could hope to teach: that using resources to benefit others creates value beyond monetary measurement. As dinner concluded and dessert arrived, the promised cupcakes presented with elaborate ceremony by the twins, I found myself momentarily overwhelmed by the contrast between present joy and past despair. The journey from that rainy night on, Weston's doorstep to this warm celebration of community and purpose, represented not just personal transformation, but the mysterious alchemy by which trauma can, when properly processed, catalyze growth and connection. Later, as we gathered coats and exchanged goodbyes, Thalia drew me aside, her expression reflecting the same contemplative awareness I'd been feeling. "I've been thinking about something Dr. Newell said in our last session," she began quietly. She talked about post-traumatic growth, how some people emerge from crisis with greater wisdom, deeper relationships, more authentic purpose than they had before. I nodded, recognizing the concept from my own reading on recovery and resilience. "It's not that trauma itself is valuable," I clarified, "but that the process of healing can sometimes take us beyond mere survival to genuine transformation." "Exactly," Thalia agreed. "Looking around tonight, at the community we've built, the work you're doing through the foundation, the ways the twins are flourishing despite everything they've experienced, I realized we're living examples of that principle." Her insight resonated with my own reflections. "Not a path anyone would choose," I acknowledged. "But having found ourselves on it, we've discovered unexpected gifts along the way." "Like winning the lottery on the worst night of your life?" Thalia suggested with a small smile. "Something like that," I agreed, returning her smile. "Though the real wealth came later, in forms no ticket could provide." The drive home passed in comfortable silence, the twins drowsy in the back seat, the spring night wrapping around us like a gentle embrace. As we turned onto Wisteria Lane, our cottage welcomed us with warmly lit windows and the silhouette of the ancient oak tree against the star-filled sky. Home. Not the one I'd imagined for my retirement years, certainly not the one I'd helped create in Thalia's house before everything fractured, but something richer and more authentic than either. A place built from conscious choice rather than circumstance or expectation. The next morning dawned clear and brilliant, sunlight streaming through bedroom windows I'd intentionally left uncurtained to welcome each new day. I dressed in comfortable gardening clothes, anticipating a morning helping Lyra with her expanding botanical kingdom before meeting Valencia for lunch to discuss foundation business. Downstairs, I found Thalia already at the kitchen table, coffee mug in one hand, pen in the other as she made notes on what appeared to be legal documents. She looked up as I entered, her expression both resolute and peaceful. "Finalizing the, divorce papers," she explained, gesturing to the stack before her. "My attorney will file them next week, after the restraining order hearing." I poured my own coffee, settling across from her. "How are you feeling about it all?" She considered the question thoughtfully, a habit that had become characteristic of her renewed relationship with her own wisdom. "Ready," she said finally, clear-headed, sad for what was lost, but not confused about what needs to happen now. Her assessment reflected the integration she'd achieved over months of dedicated healing work, acknowledging emotional complexity without being derailed by it, maintaining perspective that encompassed both past and future without being trapped. in either. There's something else, she continued, setting down her pen. Something I've been considering for a while now. I waited, giving her space to articulate thoughts that seemed to require careful expression. Orion's architectural project got me thinking, she began, referring to the cottage drawings he'd shown me. About independence, about next chapters. He's right that eventually I'll need my own space again. Not because living here isn't wonderful, but because true healing means building a life that stands on its own foundation. I nodded, heart both aching and expanding at her insight. I understand. Whenever you're ready, we'll support that transition. That's just it, she continued. I'm not ready yet, but I'm ready to prepare. To start creating what comes next. She took a deep breath. The position at Ivorwood. It's important, meaningful work. But there's another opportunity I've been exploring in parallel. She pushed a folder across the table, which I opened, to find information about a pharmaceutical startup focused on developing affordable treatments for neglected diseases. Halcyon Therapeutics, I read from the glossy brochure. What's your connection to them? They've offered me a research directorship, Thalia explained, excitement threading through her measured tone. Developing treatments for diseases that predominantly affect impoverished regions, malaria, tuberculosis, parasitic infections. The kind of work that transforms lives but offers limited profit potential, which is why most major companies ignore these diseases. I studied the materials. With growing understanding. This aligns with your original research passions, I noted, remembering her early career focus on global health equity before Weston had steered her toward more lucrative specializations. It does, she confirmed. And the company is headquartered in Boston. The implication registered immediately. Boston, nearly 3,000 miles away, a complete geographical reset. A city where neither Weston's influence nor our family history would shape her daily existence. That's significant distance, I observed carefully, working to process multiple emotions simultaneously. Pride in her ambition, concern about separation from the twins, personal loss at the prospect of her departure. It is, she acknowledged, which is why I've declined their initial offer. Relief flooded through me, though I tried to maintain a neutral expression. You have? Thalia smiled, reading my reaction with the insight of renewed connection. Not permanently, she clarified. I've proposed an alternative arrangement, consulting remotely for the first year, with quarterly visits to the Boston office, gradually transitioning to more direct involvement as the twins adjust and our family situation stabilizes. The thoughtful planning revealed both her professional confidence and her maternal priorities, neither sacrificed for the other, but integrated into a cohesive vision for her future. That sounds like an excellent compromise, I said honestly. Have they responded? Tentatively positive, she replied. The founder is another disillusioned pharmaceutical researcher. She understands work-life integration better than most executives. We're negotiating details. As Thalia outlined, the potential arrangement, I recognized the multidimensional healing she'd achieved, reclaiming not just physical safety and emotional boundaries, but professional purpose and forward momentum. The path hadn't been linear, progress sometimes measured in barely perceptible increments, occasional setbacks testing resilience. Yet here she sat, mapping a future aligned with her authentic values, neither defined by past trauma nor constrained by fear of potential obstacles. I'm so proud of you, I said simply when she finished explaining. Not just for what you've overcome, but for what you're creating from the experience. She reached across the table, taking my hand in a gesture that had become natural again, after months of rebuilt trust. I couldn't have done it without you, Mom. Not just the practical support, though that was essential, but the example you set. Watching you start over at 63, build something meaningful from circumstances that could have broken you completely. It showed me what was possible. The acknowledgement touched me deeply, affirming that my own journey had value beyond personal resilience. Before I could respond, the back door burst open, admitting the twins in matching garden boots, ready for morning planting. "Grandma, we found a robin's nest in the oak tree," Lyra announced. Orion's setting up his telescope to watch when the eggs hatch. "Not a telescope," Orion corrected with brotherly exasperation. "A modified webcam with solar power. Telescopes are for astronomical observation, not ornithology." Their familiar bickering, affectionate rather than hostile, stimulating rather than depleting, filled the kitchen with the particular energy of children engaged in discovery. Thalia and I exchanged smiles over their animated explanations, momentarily, unified in appreciation of these remarkable humans navigating their own healing journeys with courage and curiosity. Later, as I knelt beside Lyra in the freshly turned earth, helping her position delicate seedlings in prepared furrows, I found myself contemplating the curious symmetry of our family story. The night I'd stood in the rain, homeless and heartbroken, lottery check in my pocket, that moment had seemed like an ending, the final severing of family bonds I'd spent decades nurturing. Instead, it had been a beginning, painful and unwelcome certainly, but a doorway to possibility I couldn't have imagined from the other side. The funds that might have merely softened my retirement had instead catalyzed multiple transformations: physical shelter that became emotional sanctuary, financial security that enabled risk-taking, newfound independence that modeled possibilities for the next generation. "Grandma, look!" Lyra's voice pulled me from reflection as she pointed to a monarch butterfly landing delicately on a nearby plant. They always returned to the exact same garden where they were caterpillars. They never forget their first home. "Is that so?" I asked, wondering about the scientific accuracy but appreciating the poetry of her observation. "Mm-hmm," she nodded confidently. "They fly thousands of miles away, turn into something completely different, but still remember where they started. Isn't that amazing?" "It is," I agreed, watching the butterfly's wings open and close in the spring sunshine. Transformation doesn't erase memory. It just gives us a new perspective on the journey. Lyra considered this, her expression thoughtful beyond her years. "Like us, right? We're not the same as before, but we remember everything." "Exactly like us," I confirmed, touched by her insight. "We carry our history with us, even as we create something new." The butterfly lifted from its perch, carried by a gentle breeze toward the ancient oak tree where new life waited in a carefully constructed nest, watched over by a boy finding healing through observation and understanding. Inside the house, my daughter pieced together a future aligned with her authentic self, neither defined by past wounds nor limited by others' expectations. And here in the garden, knees pressed into fertile soil, hands engaged in nurturing new growth, I recognized my own transformation, from dependent to provider, from displaced to centered, from victim of circumstance to architect of possibility. The rain that had soaked me that night 6 months ago, standing alone on Weston's doorstep with nowhere to go and everything to lose, had indeed washed away something irreplaceable. But in that clearing, seeds had found purchase, taking root in unexpected soil, growing toward a light I hadn't known existed. Not an ending at all, but a beginning. Not loss, but discovery. Not rain, but renewal. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.